Hi everyone, my name is Brad and we are going to talk about work today. And what better way to start talking about work than looking at some numbers? You know, kind of like a business meeting. So we're going to look at a survey of job satisfaction by major. I believe this thing was done after people graduated and started working, and there is no guarantee that they're actually working in their field of study. It's simply how satisfied are you with your job and what was your major when you were in college. Overall numbers, the average across this whole survey was that 60.4% of people said that they were satisfied with their job. I looked at a lot of surveys like this, and that number changes wildly. I saw some as low as 13% of people being satisfied or engaged at work, up to over 90% job satisfaction. So, you know, it's bounded between almost nobody to everybody being satisfied with their jobs. My guess is there was a lot of variation in how questions were worded, who was asked, who was doing the asking, and all that stuff. Anyway, I picked this survey. Is it the best one I saw? Almost certainly not. But it has college majors included, which I thought was interesting, so that's what we'll go with. Okay, top 5 majors for job satisfaction: mechanical engineering, political science, religion, finance, and math. So if you are majoring in one of those, congratulations. And on the negative side, the top one is undecided, which, to further make fun of the survey I chose, I assume these people eventually chose a major, and I guess they didn't reclassify them when that happened. Maybe the first part of the survey was done freshman or sophomore year. Anyway, I think it's funny when sites analyzing higher education show really poor statistical research methods, which is exactly what this is. Anyway, next lowest was art and design, then fine arts, music performance, and social work. And my guess is with this lower list that other than social work, a lot of the graduates on this list are not working in their major field, at least not full-time, making enough money to support themselves. Now, some of you may now realize that I said we were going to look at numbers and I showed almost no numbers in these two lists. Let me tell you something. The numbers in the research, which I tried to put up there, they didn't actually make any sense. So earlier I said the average job satisfaction research was 60.4%. But if you calculate it out by major that they list and add it all up, which I did because I'm a math nerd, it comes to 70.7%, which is not close at all. That's 10% off. So what I have to say is, come on, studentsreview.com, you're better than this. Actually, judging by their website and having never heard of it until now, there's a good chance they're not better than this. It looks to me like a bunch of undecided majors with no job satisfaction decided to open up a website and didn't bring their similarly dissatisfied art and design majors to help pretty up the website. You may be saying, but Brad, you chose the survey from this site. I think you just like making fun of poor research techniques and numbers that don't add up. That's correct. And I will resist trying to justify what is undoubtedly an underlying character flaw. So anyway, so as the survey showed, and like I mentioned, there are a lot of surveys that show that a startling number of people are dissatisfied with their work, up to 80% of people, but probably closer to the 45 to 50% range, since that's in the middle of what I saw. This clip that I want to look at from the movie Office Space illustrates what this can be like really well. Then he's gonna ask him to come in on Sunday. I'm fully able to narrate this clip if that's what we have to do.
Oh.
Okay, I think we're switched over. So that's pretty messed up. And as I often end up saying, don't think because we showed a clip of that in church that the movie is clean. It's not. I endorse it as funny, not necessarily as clean or uplifting. But back to the point. A lot of people hate work, maybe not as much as Peter does in that clip, but it's kind of sad, especially when you consider how much of our time and of our lives we spend at work. It's roughly 30% of our overall lives are spent working. Really, working and sleeping are the two things we spend the most time doing. Nothing else is really all that close. And if we end up like Peter from the clip, hating every minute we spend at work, it means that we're in for a pretty miserable life where we miss out on what God wants for us in our lives. Yes, God wants us to be satisfied in our work. Let me give a quick summary of the book of Ecclesiastes. It's written by Solomon, the king of Israel, David's son. He's known around the world at the time for his wisdom. In writing this book, he sampled all of the pursuits on earth at the time to find out what gives meaning and what provides happiness. He examines pleasure, wealth, political power, knowledge, and throughout it, he calls almost everything meaningless, but also gives some good advice along the way. And one of the parts that keeps coming up throughout the book is this. It says, "So I decided there is nothing better than to enjoy food and drink and to find satisfaction in work. Then I realized that these pleasures are from the hand of God." Feedback for emphasis. Finding satisfaction in our work is a gift from God. This is a fundamental part of our lives on earth and the lives that God intended us to live. Oftentimes we think of work as a necessary evil, as something to be endured, but God says that it should be a source of satisfaction for us. And this is what we're going to spend the rest of our time going through. How do we engage with the type of satisfying work that is from the hand of God? And I'm going to try to balance giving kind of theoretical statements with very practical advice to both give us a framework for how to approach our work and our careers and some real steps that each of us can take in this area, whether we're in college, whether we're currently working or unemployed and looking for a job. All right, real quick on my background. I am not a full-time minister or preacher. This is something I do with my free time. I work at Raytheon. It's a big defense corporation. We have cubicles like in the clip. I've been there for 10 years. I work in finance, which is not accounting, it's different. Before that, I worked for a nonprofit, the Muscular Dystrophy Association. I worked at a bank, and I've done part-time semi-paid ministry for a year. Throughout all of these jobs and my various roles at Raytheon, which is where the bulk of my career is, my level of job satisfaction has varied quite a bit, and not necessarily how you would expect, but we'll get into that in a bit. All right, so let's start with a question. What actually makes a person satisfied with their job? What makes a person excited to get up to go to work in the morning instead of dreading it? One of the things you will often hear is, if you do what you love, you'll never work another day in your life. This is a good start. But actually, I think this, the promise here is a bit strong and out of reach for a lot of people. A lot of people have passions that either never or are rarely career options. Remember the list of the least satisfied people that we looked at by major? Those are a lot of people who majors were their passions, and they ended up not very satisfied in their jobs. And for me, the things that don't feel like work to me are like playing games, relaxing on the beach, and going to movies, which are not jobs. I can't make careers out of these things. And even the things that are close, like playing video games professionally, which is a thing now, or like playing poker professionally or being a movie critic, would require interacting with things that I love in a very different way so that they would cease to be entertainment. I like an alternative look that comes from the book we've been using in this series called Simplify by Bill Hybels. He gives 4 ways that our work needs to be aligned to give us the satisfaction we read about in Ecclesiastes. Here's what they are. It's passion, culture, challenge, and compensation. And two of these things I think are easy to understand. Passion is obviously, are you doing work that you love and are excited about? Compensation is more or less, can you actually make a living doing this? Supporting your family and your life goals and all that. And these are often the two goals that are in the greatest amount of conflict as well. But I want to start by explaining what the other two mean. Then we'll talk through, how these various things interact and how to practically deal with the conflicts between them. All right, first one is culture. I think that the biggest variation in my career with how satisfied I am with my job is in relation to culture. This is primarily how much you enjoy the people and team that you interact with while you're at work. For some people, this would also include things like the physical work environment. Are there windows? Are you working outside? I don't actually care about most of those things, but so for me, it's primarily about the people that I'm working with. And one of the most important pieces in any job is the person you are working for. There are lots of articles and studies that say when people quit a job, they're not quitting the company that they work for, they are quitting their immediate supervisor who is making their life miserable. Take my lovely wife, Lacey Miller, sitting right there, as an example. Lacey worked for 9 years as a developmental specialist at a company and as a manager of a team that helped kids under 3 who had developmental delays. She was working in an area that she was passionate about. She would somehow come home after sitting in homes with, helping kids with their developmental delays and still have energy, whereas I would have lost my mind like 3 times throughout the day. She loved her job for 7 years out of the 9 years and then hated it for 2. And what changed? The thing that changed is her company reorganized and she ended up under a new supervisor that was controlling, jealous, and hated being questioned even when they were making terrible decisions. Same job, same passion, probably even was getting paid more because it was later in her career, but a different culture, and she was suddenly miserable. And this is something for everyone to understand when you're looking for a job. Who you work for and who you work with matter an enormous amount when it comes to your day-to-day job satisfaction. Having people at your job who are friends or work friends, which is a little different, is huge. This allows you to have fun at work even when the work itself isn't the most fun. And for people who know that they're in a job where the culture isn't good, the best advice that I can give is for you to help change it. Or if it's not possible, to try to move because it will make you miserable. Often bad cultures are the result of unresolved or unvoiced conflict, of poor communication, lack of respect. And almost all of this comes down to how you treat people. It comes down to, do we think it's worth our time to keep other people in the loop on what's going on? Or do we recognize that everyone around us has intrinsic value as people and should be treated with respect? One of the best pieces of advice I can give is to be someone that other people enjoy working with. This will make both your immediate job more satisfying, and it helps your career. Because when people like working with you, your opportunities for networking and for future jobs go way up. This doesn't mean that you have to be everyone's friend, but you should be pleasant, have fun. You can joke around sometimes, communicate with people, and do what you say you're going to do. And these actually are biblical too. One of them, which we've all heard, this is the golden rule, is do to others whatever you would like them to do to you. And the other one, this is Jesus from the Sermon on the Mount. It says, you have also heard that our ancestors were told, you must not break your vows. You must carry out the vows you make to the Lord. But I say, do not make any vows. Just say a simple, yes, I will, or no, I won't. Anything beyond this is from the evil one. Okay, so that was culture, and I can't emphasize enough how big that is for day-to-day job satisfaction. The next one up is challenge. And this one has to do with whether we are doing work that sufficiently stretches us. Some people think that the ideal job is one where you don't have to really do much, where every bit of work that comes your way is easily accomplished and stress is very low. I think this goes very strongly against how God wired us. A quick example. My first job when we moved to Tucson, like I mentioned, was for the Muscular Dystrophy Association. They're the Jerry Lewis Telethon folks, which I guess he hasn't been on the telethon for like 5 years. So if you don't know about the Jerry Lewis Telethon, you're younger than me by a lot. When I worked there, I processed direct mail donations. I can't say I was super passionate about the cause, although it is a good cause. The pay wasn't great, but at the time we lived in a cheap apartment, had no debt and no kids, so it was enough money. I also liked some of the people I worked with. However, the job was super easy. Other than during our busy time, I was done with my actual required work by about lunchtime. And I had a 7-hour workday. It was 9 to 5 with a mandatory hour lunch. So pretty quickly, I started complaining to Lacey about how brainless the work was. And thankfully, she started looking for jobs for me because I probably wasn't going to do it, which would have meant that I would still work there. And they moved to Chicago like 3 years ago, their national headquarters. So that would have been interesting. I wasn't really unhappy I wasn't unhappy in general, but I also wasn't satisfied with my job because I was very stagnant and not growing. And this brings to mind a Bible verse that I really like. It's from Colossians. It says, "Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord, not for human masters, since you know that you will receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. It is the Lord Christ you are serving." So the problem I had at the Muscular Dystrophy Association is that I wasn't even remotely working with all my heart. I wasn't slacking. It simply wasn't a job that required my full effort. And this is a big point, both from a feeling satisfied in your work standpoint and succeeding in life in general. You always need to be working and growing, or learning and growing, sorry. If you're in college and looking forward to not being in school at some point, that's good. You should feel that way. But don't think that it means that your learning is done. There are not jobs that you walk out of college, walk into, and they're like, "Oh, you know everything. Welcome." You will learn like crazy for your entire career, or you should. And if you get to the point when you're not, you probably need to start asking for more to do or looking for another way to continue to grow. And this doesn't mean that you need to continually enroll in classes or anything like that, but you should always do something that is new or stretching you or further developing your existing skills, knowledge, or interests. If you're in a job now, I would advise that you spend some of your off-work time learning and developing skills that help you in your job or in other interests. One of the things that I do is I listen to podcasts. Some of them are just on interests I have, like poker or sports or some sermons. But a couple of them, The Economist and Motley Fool Money, specifically talk about things that affect my work, both specifically and more broadly. One of them talks about overall business and economic climate around the world. It talks about emerging technologies and business trends. The other one is about investing in stocks, which really means analyzing businesses and what makes them work well, what makes a great leader. And a huge amount of it is about corporate financial management, which is actually what my job is. And thankfully, I actually enjoy listening to these. It's not like I have to sit down and slog through them, which probably means that I'm at least on some level working in the right field if I want to spend some of my free time engaging with it still. It's probably a problem if you have zero interest in deepening your knowledge and skills in the area that you're working in, which would get back to the passion alignment. Okay, on the other side of this, challenge, is making sure that like I said, you make sure that you're stretched at work so that you're always growing. But at the same time, you need to make sure that work doesn't start to take over your life. I think it's sad when people are not engaged at work and that there's at least not some like desire to do well, but you can easily turn that desire to do well and to love what you're doing into something that just takes over the rest of your life. It should not get to the point where your work is more important than your family or your relationship with God. There's a pretty high percentage of people that I've worked with who are in high up positions who are divorced. And it often has something to do with working too much and neglecting their marriages, although I'm sure I'm oversimplifying in that case. But in some cases, I know that's exactly what it is. So similarly, and this goes beyond just work, it's easy to get to a point where you keep taking on more and more, keep trying to please people, including family, including friends, where you just end up being overwhelmed and overcommitted. And when you do this, you'll start to get sick because you never rest. You start to snap at people and be unhealthy, and you start to drop things. This is bad and it's different. I mean, there's one thing to be stretched, but it's another thing to get to the point where it's way too much and you're kind of losing your mind. And the Bible talks about this. In Exodus, in the Ten Commandments, it says, "You have 6 days each week for your ordinary work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath day of rest dedicated to the Lord your God. On that day, no one in your household may do any work." Something I always point out with this is that it says we work for 6 days, whereas our work week is 5. The way I always think about this is it's kind of 5 days of work or school that's kind of normal stuff. And then you will find as you get older that there's tons of work that is not your actual work that has to get done. That's like around the house, managing your finances. And one day to do that is actually almost not enough. But that can be your 6th day, and then the 7th one be resting. And having this type of rhythm and rest built in, where even when you feel like there's more to do, because there's always more to do, stopping and resting is extremely important. It's right in the Bible. God wired us this way. It helps with stress a lot. Okay, so on the challenge side, you need to balance between kind of workaholic stuff and being a little bit lazy and not pushing yourself on the other end. In the book, Bill Hybels says that you should, like where you think you're going to be comfortable, you probably need to go a notch or two past that to be stretched. But when you get beyond that, it starts getting dangerous and you get stressed out. Okay, so we've been over the 2 harder pieces. Let's look at all 4 again with a little bit of my flavor added to what these mean. So passion alignment is loving the work you do, or perhaps the cause that you're working for. Culture alignment, be loving the people you work with. Challenge alignment, being pushed to give your best and to grow. And compensation alignment, being able to make a living. And I believe you can achieve a pretty high level of satisfaction in your career in these 4 areas, and that then you'll really enjoy your time at work and experience what Solomon was referring to when he said that finding satisfaction in your work is a pleasure that comes from God. But what about when you fundamentally can't get 2 of them to work together? Specifically, your passion and making money. You may have a passion for music or film, for animals or sports. Maybe you want to fight injustice in the world or feed the hungry or save the planet, or maybe you want to do ministry, either here locally in the States or as a missionary. And these are all great passions, but are all pretty difficult ways to make a living. So again, back to something from the book. We all have a need to fulfill our passions and a need to pay the bills at the same time. And when you can't get both out of your job, the suggestion would be to supplement one or the other outside of your main job. For example, if your passion is music and you're not able to support your family or yourself by just doing music, you likely need to get a side job to pay the bills. In this situation, it should not be a job that consumes your energy outside of work, because you need your main time to pursue your passion and try to get that to become a viable career. The other option, if you have a career that pays well but is not your passion, you can pursue your passion with some of your free time. You could, for example, work at Raytheon and volunteer some of your time at a local campus church like I do. In fact, from a ministry standpoint, assuming that that is one of your passions, there is a biblical example that kind of speaks to both sides of this. The Apostle Paul was seemingly in full-time ministry, because he wrote most of the New Testament. But we read the following in his letter to the Corinthians. It says, "Don't you realize that those who work in the temple get their meals from the offerings brought to the temple? In the same way, the Lord ordered that those who preach the good news should be supported by those who benefit from it. Yet I have never used any of these rights, and I am not writing this to suggest that I want to start now. In fact, I would rather die than lose my right to boast about preaching without charge. Yet preaching the good news is not something I can boast about. I am compelled by God to do it. How terrible for me if I didn't preach the good news." In another passage in Acts, we learn that Paul is a tent maker by trade. He actually appears to have a full-time job or something near it, that he works in each of the places that he goes to do ministry, so that he's not a financial burden on the churches and cities that he visits. He fully supports himself by doing his tent making. And this is certainly not to say that it's wrong to be paid for doing ministry. The verse actually says that that's the norm. But this does point out a very prominent example of someone in the Bible who has a job that makes him money that clearly isn't his main passion. So Paul did some combination of working full-time and doing ministry on the side. Or maybe he was doing ministry full-time and making just enough money to support his ministry. he blended it well enough that it's really tough to say which it was. And we can do something similar to balance our time and our lives around our passions and financial needs. Okay, back to more practical again. If you're looking for a job in your area of passion and you can't find one at all, I would recommend finding a job that will pay the bills that is closest to your passion. The quick way to think of this is which jobs would I like the most of the alternatives that will actually pay me well enough. There's also a recommendation in the book from Bill Hybels is to pick up a book called Let Your Life Speak by Parker J. Palmer. I've not read this, but apparently it will help you identify your passion and what sort of job and career that could lead to. Other good indicators, if your main passion is not there, is what subjects in school you like the most and the work type things that you do in your free time. I know people who, if you build things in your free time, if you fix up houses in your free time, obviously that's passion-like. I know for me, when I play certain types of games, I will create spreadsheets tracking the best decisions to make. When developing a character, Lacey's shaking her head because she's seen me do this, or figuring out the best strategy when it's clear that a game's basically math, So if you're a nerd, you might do something like I do. So don't lock yourself into thinking that you only have one passion in your life. You may have one primary passion, but you likely have other things that you are passionate about in varying degrees. And chances are one of those will pay the bills. I also want to say that taking a job that pays well, even if you aren't super passionate about it, isn't bad. It's bad if it means that you totally discard your passions or if you're unhappy in it. But it's fine to let your passion and need for meaning be expressed in ways other than just through your career. In fact, this should usually be the case. We're going to spend our free time expressing our passions and the things that we care a lot about. All right, now I'm going to recap and then close with a story. First, the guiding verse when it comes to work from Ecclesiastes that we looked at was, "So I decided there is nothing better than to enjoy food and drink and to find satisfaction in work. Then I realized that these pleasures are from the hand of God." So you should find satisfaction, a sense of purpose and pleasure from your work. And if you are not finding these things in your work, or if you're thinking about a future career options, consider the 4 factors that we talked about. It's passion, loving the work you do or the cause that you work for. Culture, loving the people you work with. Challenge, being pushed to give your best and to grow. And compensation, being able to make a living. If one of these is out of alignment for you, figure out how to address it. If you aren't being challenged, ask for more work to do or look for a more challenging job like I did. If you aren't passionate about your job, either look for a job that does align with your passion or find a way to fulfill your passion outside of work. Always try to find and create good work cultures. Remember that everyone wants to enjoy their time at work. Help them do this and you will likely enjoy your work more as well. And if your job isn't fulfilling one of its most primary functions, providing for your financial needs, then you either need to look for another one that does or find a way to supplement your income. Because if you're going to spend your life dealing with financial stress all the time, it's going to be very miserable. And to close this out, I want to share something that has really helped me as a Christian in the professional world. I get stressed out at times. My job is full of pressure to hit numbers for revenue and for profit for the programs I support, and to hit deadlines, and really to get more done than I think anybody reasonably can in a normal amount of time. And when this starts happening, you can pretty easily start to get down on yourself or feel like a failure. And sometimes in any job, whether it's one like mine or something else, people will be unhappy with you. Sometimes it will be your boss, sometimes it will be your coworkers, or even yourself if you hold yourself to high standards. And this is what helps me. We're going back to the verse we looked at earlier. It says, "Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord, not for human masters, since you know that you will receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. It is the Lord Christ you are serving." What helps me is reminding myself who I really work for. I work for God. It doesn't mean that I don't listen to my boss. I do listen to him. But for me, when the stress builds, it is almost always because I am tying up my own sense of value and meaning in how I perform. And there are times that despite our best efforts, we won't achieve the success we want or that our bosses want. But that's not how God measures us. He cares about how we love and respect the people around us. He cares about us loving our families when our work threatens to pull them apart. He cares about us working with all our hearts and achieving our potential. And ultimately, even if we aren't doing well, even by these measures, he still loves us. Even if our careers crumble, even if we get fired, even if we fail, even if we have 0 out of 4 areas of work alignment, the God of the universe, our real boss, loves us anyway. And he's the one whose opinion of us matters the most. Let's pray. Dear God, I thank you that you are here with us. I thank you that you want us to be satisfied in our work and in our lives, God. And I thank you that you will help us do that. I thank you that you've given us passion and that you've helped us, that you help us through our days, God, and that you love us even when we fail. God, we love you. We pray these things in your holy name. Amen.